Welcome to Pending Final, the podcast covering all the things you never knew about VFX. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Pending Final, episode 7. And we're so glad to be here. We have had quite the 2-month hiatus, but that's what we kind of said. We both work in the industry. So, Helen, what have you been up to these last 2 months?
I have been on a journey through software. And just, dealing with the whole aftermath of The Lion King and all the bits that we needed to do for that, and watching as Maleficent 2 takes shape as well.
What she's not saying is she's been quite the world traveler.
I mean, yeah, that's like another thing that's been going on.
I live vicariously through her like business travels and things. I've always wanted to travel for work, even if it's just for like a week. And she's been to Montreal, she's been to, almost said Mumbai, sorry, wrong company, to Bangalore. So yes. Yeah,
it's been good. It's been nice to see the world.
She's the cultured one out of the two of us. She's modest. She's modest. And yeah, I had a little thing called The Dark Crystal come out, and The Lion King. But that's what's also very exciting, because we can finally kind of talk about The Lion King and animation versus kind of not, what would you say, traditional animation? Or what's the two different animation styles that we are going to be talking about tonight?
So what I wanted to talk about tonight was animation in general in feature films. So we've got animation that you might consider animation, like Shrek or Monsters Inc. or anything like that. But then we've also got things like stop motion, and then there's the CG stuff that you see, like Thanos walking around being all fancy with his big purple face. So there's a sort of a variety of different ways that animation gets used in feature film.
So kind of separating animation as a narrative tool, animation as a discipline within visual effects, and animation as a style and technique, be it either CGI, stop motion, things like that.
Yeah, you put it exactly how I should have.
We rarely have these moments, but yes. It just came to me. That's all I can say on the fly here.
Before we start, I also just wanted to give a shout out to Graham, who's one of our, I'm gonna call him fans, who we got a lovely email with some feedback on how to make the show better.
Yes.
So we are doing our best to improve things for the fans.
Oh yes, absolutely, because that's all we can do. It's like definitely a growing process and things like that. So very much thank you for that, Graham.
Should we start with the main topic?
Yes, let's dive right in.
Cool. So if we just very quickly, just high level, what is animation?
Yes.
Animation is an illusion. We sometimes kind of forget about that in visual effects because we're working within 3D space. But the whole concept of animation is part of filmmaking in the illusion of movement. So what you're seeing is multiple single images, one after the other, quickly enough to make you think there's a moving image there. So obviously your most famous animation would be Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which was released in 1937, but was originally proposed in 1934. So it had a 3-year development process, which is fun because that's kind of not changed that much. Your Pixar's, your Disney animation movies, they tend to be like a 2-3 year development cycle as well. So it's just fun to see that in all these years, it's still a 3-year process regardless.
Yeah, there are
no
certain
matter how
things.
the technology increases.
Exactly. The technology can help, but there are sometimes it's just time. You cannot, crack a whip at it or anything like that. You have to just wait.
Exactly. So obviously Snow White is our first feature-length animation. Before then, we've obviously got all other types of visual effects that we sort of discussed in our extraordinarily brief history of visual effects.
Episode 4. Episode 4.
But this is sort of the big sort of standout moment. Other honorable mentions I will also throw out: Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was a 1988 film. I think we also mentioned this one the big history, but it's another sort of standout big animation movie where you've got some really significant work happening in it to really like push. Like it's one of those movies where if there was no animation, there would be no story, which is, I think, the driving force of animated movies and animation in movies. Is it's things that the story can't do without.
Yes.
As well as things like 2D animation, we also have stop motion. Another shout out for Ray Harryhausen.
Yes.
Because that's some pretty classic stop motion. But also in recent years, we've got things from Aardman, who are a British company, and they, Wallace and Gromit, Chicken Run, all that good stuff. And then obviously Laika as well, who have just recently done Isle of Dogs, which is another stop motion. It's another animated feature where the story cannot continue without the animation.
Yes.
So that's basically the whole point of it. And then what Shannon and I do all day is visual effects. So this is less 2D animation and less stop frame animation, and more performance capture, keyframe animation by animators. It's driving 3D models in a CG environment, CG models in a 3D environment, 3D models in a 3D environment. All those combinations, pick one. So again, it's things that we can't do in real life. So if we have the obvious things are, your Thanos, your big CG monsters, all the grey DC villains, things that you can't do in camera. But it also includes things like digidoubles, where we replace a person or like a stunt double or an actor with a 3D version of them so that we can do something to them, like get them ripped in half. Because you can't do that to celebrities for some reason.
And also, to interject and interrupt, you can also do it to help modify a performance on such things as inanimate puppets.
Talk about it.
It's just, to be honest with you, it was a very simple. For The Dark Crystal, the performance is definitely done by puppeteers. It's amazing, but it was kind of to give them just a very slight bit of life. We had animation augmentations to where it could be something as slight as making the puppet smirk. You can't really do that with a motorized hand mouth. You can get the phonemes motions, which is something maybe we can discuss in a minute what I mean by when I say phonemes and things, but you can get, a wink. I mean, they did have motorized eyes, but it's just those little nuances in the face. And again, is an example on how animation can actually enhance a performance that's already there. This can also go hand in hand and tie in with motion capture as things, because motion capture is very much captured on set, but does require animators to sometimes clean up and just adjust the performance slightly. So we're going to break animation down into the kind of the 3 parts we just mentioned. So we're first going to start with animation kind of as a narrative device. So that meaning kind of like our 2D animated films, 3D animated films, such as Pixar and things like that. So kind of handing it back off to Helen. Do you think, kind of going into the whole 2D, 3D animation, one of the things, and we can maybe do this in our crosstalk section a little bit, but I don't like when people go, when like a 2D or 3D movie has been made about each other, they go, I fixed it, or things like that. Like, it's 2 different styles. You can't really compare them because it's telling a story. That's why I think I get angry. It's like, it's about a story. It doesn't matter what kind of animation, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you kind of see this with the way that Disney went from their traditional 2D animation into all their 3D movies like Bolt and Tangled and all that stuff. And then they've also done like Princess and the Frog, which came after a whole bunch of 3D movies and was sort of lauded for, return to, classic animation. But I think people kind of forget how much computing power goes into something like Princess and the Frog. Like, it isn't like Snow White anymore, where it's people just sitting drawing on celluloid. Like, it's still digital work that people are doing. It's just, is it 2D or 3D? Is it a flat looking image or a CG object? And even then it gets crazy, because you think about something like Aladdin or Lion King, the original one, where you go, Lion King, the original one. Wow. Lion King, the original one.
That's going to be a shirt. That's going to be a shirt.
Where you've got, say in Aladdin, the escape from the Cave of Wonders sequence, where he's hopped onto the magic carpet and he's flying through the steadily dissolving, like, destroyed cave. And it's all very obviously CG work, but it kind of works because there's no other way they would have been able to do it. And it's the same with the carpet, with the pattern on the carpet, where they couldn't do that with hand-drawn images because
it would be too difficult to transfer the print with the folds and the animations and things. It would just be, they would have had to have a very simple pattern instead.
Yeah. So what they did is they used CG. They went, here's the design, here is how it should be in all of its different poses, and now we can work with that. So even in like the early 90s, we're still using CG to create 2D films. So things start getting a little bit blurred. And when I say Lion King, I obviously mean the stampede in the gorge sequence.
Yes.
With all those wildebeest and that giant crowd sim that I'm fairly certain I've also talked about before.
Yes, we do slightly repeat ourselves, but it's because they're pillars of various disciplines in visual effects and things. And it's funny, in my class, we actually called it 2.5D.
Yeah.
Because it's still, for predominantly 90% of it, a 2D project. And a lot of the things, for me, it's like, I guess the reason why it's 2.5D was, pardon me, it had a 3D camera, but it didn't move. It didn't, that's where in my opinion, that's the only thing that separates. What's the difference? Well, maybe it's a bit of a generalization, but what separates 2D animation from 3D animation? Oh, you have a digital camera that moves.
Yeah. There's a lot more moving about in 3D space.
Yeah. One of the things that actually really stood out to me very recently, showing how an animation style can be chosen as also like a narrative way of storytelling, was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yep. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
What I love about that film was, I mean, Helen had talked about it before on our podcast here, and I hadn't seen it yet. Well, I saw it about last month, and I absolutely love it. And what makes it work on obviously other multiple levels is the storytelling and things like that, but some of the characters purposely have different animation styles.
Yeah.
So you have the noir Spider-Man who, sorry, there might be a few minor spoilers here. I don't think so, but just in case.
But also it's been out for many months, and if you wanted to see it, you've definitely seen it and own the DVD by now.
Yeah. The
but also spoilers, I guess.
Yeah. But it was great that you could see, like, the anime one was drawn like an anime, and it was, or like the pig, the spider pig looked more like a Looney Tunes character, but it worked. That it's like, it just proved the basic premise of, if you don't know, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is basically you get multiple universes in one and they cross each other. So what better way to show these different crazy alternate realities in animation is by different animation styles. And I just thought that was brilliant. And it was one of the first times very recently I was like, there is a kind of tool technique not vice or whatever. I don't want to say gimmick because it didn't feel like a gimmick, but
You can say gimmick.
okay, one of the gimmicks that worked narratively. And
Yeah.
the other thing is too, and you might be able to back me up or kind of give a bit of more insight into it, is also Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is fully framed animated, meaning if you go frame by frame, every frame something is different or moving. It doesn't kind of hold frames, like 3 frames or whatever per kind of more classical animation. Is that correct?
Actually, the opposite.
Oh.
There's a lot of moments during this movie where the characters are animated on 2s. So instead of every frame they change, they actually move every other frame. And one of the big, again, spoilers, I guess, but one of the big things is like you've got Miles where he starts developing his powers and he's on 2s and the background is still moving at proper frame range, like proper frame rate. So the background is moving frame by frame, but he is frame, wait, and it gives you that staggered look of what's going on here. And
okay.
but also there's a section where Miles and Peter are swinging through the trees, escaping from Alchemax, and they are flipping through the trees, and they are both on 2s, but they're on alternating 2s. To show how out of sync they are until they start working together, and then they go back on, and then they sync up and they're on 2s together. And it's to give the impression of being a comic book.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay,
But,
maybe that's what I
also-
was seeing, because I saw something on Twitter, and again, because I hadn't seen the film at the time, they were kind of showing, and so maybe that's what they were showing, is what it would be like if it was full framed, and then what with the two that rule that you were just saying. That's cool.
Yeah. So one of the other cool things is that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse kind of cleaned up at SIGGRAPH this year. Everyone wanted to know what Sony Animation had been doing, because they essentially not went quiet for a while, but they were just, getting on with stuff, and then suddenly we have this incredible trailer for Spider-Verse, and then we have this crazy, like, lauded Oscar, whatever, stupid nominated film, nominated for everything that it can be nominated for, and then it's just like, well, where did this come from? And some of the things that they used for it were machine learning. So their algorithm learnt where a human would draw lines over their CG characters and then applied it. So it's not a cool renderer that they're using. It's machine learning that they're using to place where his eyebrow lines are, where that little wrinkle in between his eyebrows sits. All that information is stuff that the machines, that their algorithms have learnt based on what people are drawing over their material. It's some really impressive stuff, and you really should look it up because it's so cool. Like Sony Pictures Sony Pictures Animation absolutely just went off this year.
I hope that. I think you were saying they're trying to patent it. Now I know why, because like that's a very unique tool.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I do not understand it. Like I want to read everything about it. I want to learn everything about it. Not at all.
Okay. Because I'm just thinking if a computer is kind of guessing what a human hand would draw in the next kind of couple of frames or whatever.
But do you know what it does?
What does it do?
It makes it smooth. Because you have a human hand doing every single frame or every 2 frames, and it's so much less smooth than, because you don't have those in-betweens. So one of the things about animation is you have keyframes. So you keyframe your poses. You start with your most extreme poses, and then you work to, so you've got 10 frames. Frame 1, you have someone crouching down really small. Frame 10, you have them like with their arms and legs all in the air. And then in between those, you need to draw what happens in between. It's basically the generation of intermediate frames. So you don't need to draw every single frame from 1 to 10. You could do 1, 3, 5, 7, and 10.
I see.
And then the computer will generate what goes in between. Tweening.
That's okay. I'll buy that. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I was crazy, but no, it's tweening.
Nice.
And it's just a cool side effect of this illusion, right? Where you have the illusion of motion.
So that's kind of covering animation use as a narrative, kind of dovetailing that into our like second kind of part. Do you feel, and I have an example, but Helen, do you feel that certain styles of animation choose better for it as a narrative tool than, say, a different one? I.e., for example, I feel Isle of Dogs had such a lovely charm to it as a story and as a look of animation because of the style they decided to use to tell the story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know if Isle of Dogs would have worked out quite as well if it had been, like classic Disney animation
Yeah.
with the same face on every character and every dog very cute and round and sweet. Yeah, I mean, the way that Leica do their stop motion, it has a very unique look to it. Part of that is just the character design. Everything is very asymmetrical. They've got a lot of sort of interesting shapes in there. There's a lot of weird exaggerations. But I think a lot of that movie also comes down to the director, because he's kind of got a
quirk to him.
A habit of really weird framing and sort of strange like looks to camera, and there's all sorts of things that make that movie particularly special. And I'm not saying that the animation does not count for that, but it's got a lot going on to make it the weird movie that it is.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm trying to think of another one that worked better in its style. I mean, I guess Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, again, worked because of the being able to have the different animation styles. So it kind of covers both of our
absolutely
points.
And things like what one of the things about animation is, like I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, doing things that you can't do in any other way. A character like Kingpin from Into the Spider-Verse, like I don't know if anyone would have seen this, but I'm like, can we put it on the Instagram if people haven't seen it? There is a cosplayer who went as big, enormous Wilson Fisk, right? And it's crazy. They look completely insane. And you sort of go, and that's why it's an animation.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't look completely bonkers when you put it in that universe.
Yeah.
So it allows this amount of exaggeration, and sort of you can overdo things, like the whole idea of having say Monsters Inc., where you've got Mike and Sully, and Mike is a big square. Sorry, Mike is a big circle and Sully is a big square. Like, even things like that, where you can see the character design, there's a lot more room to play with it. There's a lot more room to be expressive. And then there's a lot of visual shortcuts that you can use there. So like the idea of a square is, big, dependable, solid, blah. There's Sully, you've got round, it's like, it's bouncy, it's energetic, it's Mike. You don't need all the any more information apart from just the shapes. And obviously when you get to the animation that we deal with every day with just VFX animation, everything's a lot more realistic, it's a lot more grounded, and even when we're doing space fights, it's still very realistic and people are trying to make it look physically possible. Whereas Into the Spider-Verse, Wilson Fisk is literally wider than he is tall, and you just run with it.
Yeah. Well, it had a very interesting, this guy is huge and like is meaning business.
Yeah.
So finally kind of getting into our third section about animation, and then kind of we'll probably dovetail into our crosstalk talking about The Lion King. We're now going to talk about, and this is definitely more of our bread and butter and what's kind of more visual effect tied. Now that you know kind of how animation can be used in the two other kind of ways we talked about, is animation within visual effects as a discipline. This can be used as a tool. This can be used to help with the photo reel and things like that.
So best place to begin would probably be with motion capture and performance capture, which is where people see ping pong ball suits, people with dots on their faces, all that. the one that the sort of my go-to. I know a lot of people go for Gollum from Lord of the Rings, but my go-to, I think, will always be Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean 2, just because it's literally one of my favorite CG characters of all time, and it still holds up somehow, and I don't understand how, because a lot of those films are a bit But so performance capture is basically just a way to get data about the performer into the computer so that we could start working with it. So whether that's something like where you have an actor like Bill Nighy or whoever is in Cats being a cat, any of those people, you want to track their faces to make their face be part of the character that they're playing. So that's sort of one really important thing is being able to have the personality of the actor come through, which I think, like I say, Davy Jones.
That's definitely more what they call, correct me if I'm wrong, a performance capture instead of motion capture, because I think sometimes in the common lay person those get used interchangeably.
Yeah, so performance capture is that sort of stuff where you want to preserve the actor. Motion capture is more about the sort of grander motions of that performer. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the actor playing the character. It can be, for example, a stunt performer.
And yeah, sometimes, and so also what also makes performance capture and motion capture different, motion capture will usually be on like a stage, kind of like at Imaginarium or other places like that, where performance capture, where, as Helen mentioned, Davy Jones, that was also, you'll hear about it in our episode 4, where we talked about a new form of performance capture and motion capture, where it was actually done on set. So that way you didn't have to have this silly blue screen stuff. It even just made those non-human characters seem that much more real there on set.
And yeah, because it means that everyone around them gets to act to them. We're not having situations like, I don't know, the first Star Wars movie where they're looking at tennis balls on sticks and going, yes, I totally know what I'm looking at right now. They've definitely designed this character that I'm talking to. But yeah, so motion capture is more for those grand sweeping things, and it means that we can replace people.
Well, funny enough, one of the things I did, because like Helen has mentioned, it doesn't have to be like your hero character. We had something I had to do where I got one of the runners to do Thriller, and we were able to take that and put it to old character models, and we had a whole bunch of characters doing Thriller.
Amazing.
That might have been before your time, Helen. I don't remember.
It might have been. So a movie that I worked on a while ago that I have very fond memories of the mocap for is Alien Covenant, which had one of my favorite sequences I've ever worked on in a show, which was where all the engineers, spoilers for a movie from several years ago that people either watched or didn't. But
I just love your dry delivery on this. It's amazing. Continue.
Spoilers, I guess. And so there's a section with all the engineers are dying horribly. And one of my favorite things I've ever seen is the mocap that we shot for some dying engineers, where they got one of the coordinators, popped him in a mocap suit, and then he went to our mocap room and flailed about on the floor for a while, and we recorded it and put it in the movie.
Because for those who may have not seen the film or need a reminder, basically what happens is this like almost like insect like parasite gets into the bodies, and like things pop out like all of a sudden.
It's so gross and so cool.
What Helen doesn't remember, it's what got us to be friends in the first place and what we bonded over. So thank you, Alien Covenant. that and the on-set photos. But
they were so good. I wish I could keep them.
Oh, I know. So yes, because we both worked on the same floor, and but yes, basically this goo you get lots of funky shapes and things. So it's think of the chest like burster, but happening to everybody in the massive chaos of a swarm. It's so yeah. I bet you that footage must have been hilarious, seeing the flailing about like.
So good.
So what we'll do, guys, is we will link in the description down below the YouTube link to the kind of reel that MPC has made that is based off this sequence to kind of explain. But now you will look at it with fresh new eyes, knowing there was a guy that had to flail about, and we use those animations in a crowd simulation.
Yeah. Amazing. So good. Our animators don't necessarily always work from motion capture. In fact, most of the time they're just working from reference. For example, Lion King, it's not like we could put lions in mocap suits and make them dance.
Yeah, you could try, but you're going to go through a lot of hands.
So with that, it's putting reference together, it's getting huge amounts of video footage. To a degree, this is something else that I will find a good breakdown of. A lot of recording themselves saying things or doing things, maybe not necessarily with The Lion King, but with other films I've worked on. I've seen artists sitting there in front of the little mirror in front of them whilst they practice making weird faces, or recording each other doing really strange stuff. The animation floor is probably one of my favorite places to be when they're in full production mode, because you'll just have like somebody recording someone else just making strange poses or like miming drinking a cup of tea, or just strange stuff that they need to just reference very quickly. So there's some really cool things that the animators will do, and obviously it's animation is probably one of the more I would say it's probably one of the more easily understood parts of the visual effects process.
Correct.
Just because it's really hard to look at an FX breakdown and go, yes, I see what they're doing there. But with animation, it's a little bit more recognizable. It's stuff that people would understand looking at, without any explanation there.
Yeah, it's one of probably the most self-explanatory. That and I think composition are probably two of the most self-explanatory disciplines within visual effects that the common person could watch it. They might even, animation they might know by name, comp they might, but not, but they could go, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So yeah, definitely, I would agree with that. So kind of bouncing off of that, we're going to now kind of jump into what we call crosstalk, where we kind of take a topic that's a bit kind of not controversial, or it's just things that got people talking either in the industry or in the everyday. And of course, we're slightly out of date, like we said, because we've been busy ladies. The debate in the water cooler chat is The Lion King an animated film or a live action film?
Tell me what you think.
Do you know,
has your position changed since we last discussed
this?
No,
it hasn't changed. I'm just finding it difficult to try to explain. It is, in my opinion, a photoreal. It's hard to even word it, but it's a live action. It's a photoreal film with animation. I don't know how to explain it. It's not an animated film in the sense of what we've just discussed in point 1 and point 2. It's not done, and people may disagree. This is why and I'm very interested to see what you think, but it was not made the way it was made as a narrative.
Nah, this is a live action movie because it was shot like a live action movie.
Okay.
In the same way that it was shot the same way Avatar was.
Oh yes, because that's it. I would say to people, and it was very difficult at the time because obviously it hadn't come quite out yet, so we had to be careful, but the virtual production aspect, because yes, you are correct. I remember seeing the footage where they were using basically camera rigs to do the camera movements, but the thing was it was going into a computer instead of on an actual camera on set. That's what a virtual production is. You're doing the camera movements, but it's just there's not an actual physical tangible camera there.
It's not a purely animated movie.
Yeah.
You could say, it was storyboarded. So are live action movies.
Well, yeah, nowadays everything has previs.
But it was all animated. Like, have you seen any shots from like Endgame? Yeah, a lot of that was an animation too. Like, just because it's a feature length doesn't make it not a live action movie.
I think that's why I've started calling it a photo reel, because I know people get all bent out of shape about live action because but they're like, a guy at work, bless him, he's great, but he challenges me. And this was the hard thing that I was struggling to answer was, he was like, well, they're 3D characters. They're not live action. I'm like, well, no, they're not. But the way it was done, he's like, but they were animated. And I was just like, yes, but that doesn't make it an animated film. He's like, so it was one of those kind of things that's just like.
So here's one for you. Rango.
Animated.
But rendered like it was photoreal. It was a really weird thing that ILM did, because they made these very stylized characters that could never exist in the real world. And then they textured them, and they lit them, and they photographed them like they were real things. And it was the most jarring thing I've ever watched.
I would agree with that, actually.
I love it, but Beans scares me. And I think that when you start watching The Lion King, it is jarring at first, but you kind of settle into it. I never really got over Beans.
Which one's his Beans again?
It's the love interest. She's terrifying.
Oh, because she's an armadillo, isn't she?
She's like a lizard or something. I don't know what she's supposed to be.
See, but you see how my immediate reaction when you said Rango, I said animated, because we're talking about, a little lizard wearing a Hawaiian shirt kind of thing. Whereas with the photo real 2019 Lion King, yeah, they're like what the lions you see either on TV or, in sanctuaries and things like.
Yeah. I think what's crazy is how people have reacted to that compared to reacting to Lady and the Tramp. Because Lady and the Tramp is like cats and dogs.
Yeah.
Where it's real dogs with patch-moved mouths moving over the top by the looks of it. Because they're saying, these are our rescue dogs. They're rescue dogs and I love them so much.
Yeah.
But also, you're making their mouths move. So are you doing a cats and dogs situation here where they're like, half the time the little mouths are the only things that are animated? Is this look who's talking?
Yeah.
But people reacted so well to it, and I don't know if they would have reacted that well to it if Lion King hadn't come out.
Yeah.
And they hadn't been like, but their eyes weren't expressive enough.
Well, yeah, and this is interesting. We were talking about this at work. They called it the 7%. One camp wanted to push just that little 7% to where you could get a slight smile or a slight more scared look, or basically get those eyebrows on those lions. And then you had another camp go, no, they don't do that in nature. And that's the big thing. Do you just slightly push that 7% where you just enough? And I think that's why Lady the Tramp people, because that's what they want. And it's tricky. That's why in my opinion, I feel taking the principles applied to the Jungle Book to the Lion King and not doing that 7% hurt it.
Agreed.
I totally get what the brief was. Take the two different Jungle Books that came out. Both are fine, and when I'm saying this, there's nothing wrong with either of them. I'm not criticizing, plus I have friends and family that have worked on both. But what it is one, the brief was photoreal animals. How they move, how they, eat, drink, everything. They just are talking. But
even then, right, like Jungle Book, they were just, like, they weren't that photoreal because they were all enormous.
Well, I forgot about that. They had to
specifically.
I did forget about that. They were oversized. But again, I feel why people didn't feel as jarred by the performance was because you had the human boy there. There was your performance that was there. Whereas I bet you, if you cut out all the scenes and just looked at, like, say, the scene of Bagheera and Baloo walking on the log, it's going to be the same as Lion King.
Oh, it is. It is. But also I think that that 7% would not have been completely unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because, like, you have a cat, I have cats, I have a dog. They move their eyebrows. They make faces. They don't have dead eyes.
Yeah.
And it feels like they went a little bit too far in the other direction, because they were so desperate to not make it look like a cartoon character that they killed them a little.
Yeah. The biggest debate was that scene, that shot of Simba looking up at the wildebeest, because also that is a very iconic shot from the original. You've got the what's the zoom called that they do in Jaws, and it's oh god, it's not a dolly zoom. Oh, you're gonna have to hit us up in the comments.
It's not a dolly zoom.
Counter zoom.
Counter zoom.
Yes, that's it. Because where the background, where the basically a counter zoom is where the subject moves forward, but the background goes out. It's famously used in Jaws. It's usually good to emphasize that, pardon me, but that oh shit moment. And I'm sorry to swear a little bit, but that's just the best way to describe it. Is and that was one of those shots. But no, the 7%, like, I agree that it's all that I personally feel The Lion King needed. Also, kind of off on a non-animation point, but this is my hot take.
Beyonce.
Yes, that woman did not need to be in it. And I think actually was a detrimental to the performance and everything. She wasn't even there. And this is all public knowledge. Like, this is not behind the scenes. We know exclusively. But her and Donald Glover were never in the same room. They didn't even record at the same time, whereas the Timon and Pumbaa stuff, the three of them were in that room. It worked. She wasn't even there for the cast photo. She had to be photoshopped in. When she came to the premiere, she just sauntered in. Look, listen, I like Beyonce's music. I kind of like her as a person, but I felt she did not mesh with that cast. She was Lady B with the Lion King cast. And I feel it really hurt the performance. I could give 2 flicks about her. And just, yeah.
I think it's this is something that I know you've said about the editing before on that movie, but it's there were times when it felt like either she was rushing what she was saying, or they'd cut it so that she didn't pause for breath. Like the scene where Nala and Simba meet up again, and she's like, Simba, oh my god, it's you, like, why don't you come back to the Pride Lands? It's been so long, I haven't seen you. And I'm just like, what the, take a breath,
I
woman.
had such issues with
Have an
this.
opinion.
I guess, again, because I am so invested in the original. So I want to say, first of all, I enjoyed, as not just someone who has worked on it, because luckily I was off the project for about 9 months, so I didn't see the finished bit. So there was a lot I hadn't seen. So I am a fan of it, but obviously growing up with the film, you very much have your own opinion. In the original film, there's a moment where they like, and even if you saw someone you hadn't seen in, let's say, 15 years, you're going to have a, whoa, who the heck are you?
Yeah,
there
exactly.
was, and it wasn't even a moment. It was just like, Pin, Simba? I was like, what? No. Like, just...
Yeah, like, how do you recognize him? He looks like every other lion in the Pride Lands.
Yeah, and actually, now that you mention it, like, it was her stuff. Because even, like, the Timon and Pumbaa stuff, they had moments, they had beats, they had breaths, and I really think that's down to they're not being together. You unfortunately, trying to simulate conversation. That's why there are dialogue editors as a job, to make sure as a conversation you either get those crossovers or you get those pauses, and knowing the pristine timing between the two makes it or breaks it. And in this case, it broke it. I'm not saying that it's the editor's fault or anything like that. I'm just talking about the pacing and things, because I think tragically we had 2 separate editors, but it's so definitely no disrespect when I say about the edit. I'm just saying in general, like,
yeah, man. But Lady and the Tramp.
Yeah.
I
don't know, because I think, like, I'm wondering.
That's the good stuff.
I'm wondering, like, that shot where he's talking through the fence, because we were breaking it down at work, proper cooler talk, where we're like going frame by frame. That, I think, is not just his eyes are animated. They're not that
really funny, because when it's I can only hope that this is a trailer and not finished shots. But all the shots, you can tell when it's an animated dog because their eyes are bigger.
And brighter.
You should probably edit the footage of the real dogs to match your animated dogs. Otherwise, it's going to be real off-putting.
Yeah.
Disney.
Yeah.
Please tell me you're about to go through a process of enlarging some eyeballs. Because, yeah, it's just so obvious between shots, like, when it's just a dog and when it's an animated dog.
Well, the other thing too, and again, this was a conversation discussed that what I had learned about animals in general being on The Lion King is most animals, their eyes are very dark. Like especially in dogs, they're dark brown with a black pupil, which is also what I feel hurt that performance, because you didn't see the white of the eyes, because in photoreal animals, for the most part, there aren't white parts. There are if they're really exaggerated, but that's again why I also feel people's criticism, which again is justified, about The Lion King was because they're expecting human white eyes. Well, guess what? That's not in animals. And that's the other thing I noticed about the Lady and the Tramp dogs was, especially Tramp, his eyes are a very vivid yellow, but then not with the live action dogs, like they're dark.
Yeah, we can only hope that it's an unfinished
I
product
think so.
and we'll be seeing final things. But even then, I'm hyped about that. I'm hyped about Disney Plus.
Come to the UK. It's not even in the UK yet.
I know, but like,
I'm so excited about this.
We've been through this before, but right, let me just very quickly, again with my shameless Marvel self-indulgence, everyone in work has heard this about 1,000,000 times, but look, I never expected to get half of this, right? And here we are with a Loki TV show. Like, Tom Hiddleston is probably going to have been in more movies and more products than every other person on that cast. We've got more Falcon, we've got more Winter Soldier, can't wait. Hawkeye, we're getting Kate Bishop, a character I never thought I would see in a movie, and she's going to be in a TV show with Jeremy Renner with his crazy fingers and his weird app. Oh my god, I'm so excited about every single thing they're doing.
His weird app?
I want to see. Yeah, oh, you missed the Jeremy Renner app
No.
thing.
Okay. You'll have to explain me off recording. Sorry, I was like...
Oh, yeah. So, like... There's so much stuff going on for Disney Plus, and like I'm fairly certain half of it hasn't even started production yet. I saw, this is going to date today's episode, but I saw today's news was that Leavesden is becoming Disney's Pinewood.
Yes.
Like they're just going to move in.
I thought it was Shepperton.
I thought it was Leavesden.
It might be either.
Oh god, it might be both. There's no way of knowing. They own everyone. But like, the WandaVision thing? What the fuck? That's gonna be so cool and so weird. Like, look, I am the weird outlier amongst my friends. No one else likes Wanda. No one else likes the Vision. I love both of them.
Cheesy Gordita.
TV show with both of them. Cheesy Gorditas, the pair of them. I love them. Oh my god, we're getting all this Disney stuff. There's Lizzie McGuire is coming back. High School Musical, the series. I didn't even like High School Musical.
Title,
and here I am going, what is this show?
That title
I
is
need
the
it
worst
now.
title, though. It has too many does.
Exceptional.
Oh,
Mwah.
God.
Beautiful. Italian chef kisses. Mwah. It's all good. I'm so excited about everything coming to Disney Plus. They need to bring it out in the UK. Whatever it is that's stopping them from bringing it here, presumably it's a deal with Sky or some BBC iPlayer garbage. But they need to sort that out because I will pay them all my money every month.
So ready. I'm so ready. And also, it's exciting because that's also booming the visual effect industry here.
Yeah,
it's all coming.
Visual effects,
it's
man.
all coming to London because the big Disney Plus hub is in London, and I'm so excited. So I'm like, yes, please, I'll work on any of that.
Yep,
any of it.
Yeah, it's gonna be really good. And like, what's in production right now? We've got Cruella's in production, right? That we saw some set photos for that. There's a Black Widow movie is in production right now. Eternals, I think, has started filming. Like, there's good stuff coming, and I just want it now, please. I don't even want to work on this stuff. So I almost had the opportunity to go and work at the company that do Sherlock. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because if I'd known anything about that last series, I would have flipped every desk I'd ever seen every day until now. Like, I would have just been mad, and I would rather not know in advance how things are going to turn out.
So, needless to say, per Helen's excitement and my excitement, even with all the even with the controversy of The Lion King, Disney is fine, and I think it's going to be great. And we will have lots of lovely visual effect things to deep dive into in the next coming years. I do think Disney Plus has been hinted that it is coming out in the UK in probably late January-ish.
But I don't want to wait until January.
Oh, wait, don't trust me. I'm waiting for The Mandalorian, so yeah.
Yep.
So breaking down our final bullet points that why we feel The Lion King, the new one, is not an animated film.
It was not shot like one.
There we go.
The end.
The end. Hence, it's not an animated film because it wasn't just cameras set up in Maya.
Approved. Final.
There we go. So, kind of some interesting things that have happened in our absence. We now have a YouTube channel. So, if you do dig podcasts, but you're not kind of the type to listen to podcasts, like, say, on Spotify or, iTunes and things like that, we now have a YouTube channel, but we are desperately needing about 100 followers, so that way we can actually have a YouTube at pending final kind of URL. So if you liked this, please give us a like and subscribe. If you're our Audible listeners, and thank you for checking us out on the various podcast forms. We're still trying to get onto iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, but thank you for checking us out on things like Spotify and Google Podcasts and things like that. But if you want to know, go to anchor.fm/pending final, and you can find out where all our wonderful kind of podcast outlets where you can find us. Where else can they find us socially, Helen?
So we are at Pending Final on Twitter. We are Pending Final on Facebook. We're at Pending Final Podcast on Instagram. And you can email us at pendingfinal@gmail.com for any questions or beautiful submissions of feedback. Thank you, Graham.
Yes, thank you. So great. Well, with that, we will see you guys next time.